Good evening, everyone. Welcome. Just started the webinar, so I know a bunch of folks are logging on. So you see the participant number going up. And we will just give it a couple minutes just for some last minute folks who might be still waiting to hop on. And then we will go ahead and get started shortly. And as folks are joining us, if you have any questions for the group, please use the Q&A feature so that way we can be sure to get the questions answered. And for folks that are curious about whether or not we are recording this, we will be recording this. Actually, I think it's already recording, and we will be able to send this out via email once we get the file edited and situated. So anyone that's on this call right now, you'll get an email from us with the recording link after the event. All right. Well, it is 7:02. So I'm just going to go ahead and get started this evening. So let me just get my stuff situated. All right. Good evening and welcome to our eighth annual Becoming a Terp webinar. I know that with us this evening are some of the most proud Terp alums and excited prospective Terps, eager to learn more about the University of Maryland and what it has to offer. My name is Jessica Lee. I'm the Director of Engagement and Outreach at the Alumni Association and also a double Terp with a bachelor's degree in neurobiology and a master's degree in higher education. So not only did I spend some of my favorite years in College Park as an undergraduate and graduate student, but I've also been extremely fortunate enough to spend over 10 years post-graduation working at the University of Maryland. I always joke about how I loved Maryland so much that I literally never left, and it's definitely true, as you can see. But reflecting back, I remember applying to Maryland about 15 years ago, which is crazy that it's been that long. Unsure where I would end up for college. Growing up, I grew up in Howard County, Maryland, so go Hoco Terps. And I remember thinking that I definitely wanted to go to a college out of state, like most in-state students do, without really giving Maryland a fair consideration at the time. So fast forwarding now to today, I can confidently say that attending Maryland for both of my degrees was one of the best decisions that I've made in my life, providing me with so many opportunities that I didn't know existed, including my current job, which is great to say. So the university has over 40,000 students, nearly 30,000 of which are undergraduates. And these undergraduate students study in 12 academic colleges, and they represent over 100 different majors. They have internships here in the DMV, on the West Coast, across the globe. And these students get involved across campus and the over 800 student clubs and organizations that exist. So for the prospective Terps here with us tonight, if there's one thing that I'd like you to take away from attending this session, it's that the University of Maryland Alumni Association is here to support every student from day one. So that starts pretty much now from you joining this call. So the Alumni Association strives to improve the experience of prospective and current Terps through our many career resources to connect students with internships and job opportunities, as well as programs like the Student Alumni Leadership Council, otherwise known as SALC, to help students connect with Maryland traditions and other TERP alums. For the Terp alums who are here with us this evening, we're here for you too, and we want to help you deepen your connection with your alma mater and strengthen the Maryland traditions that you love. So remember, you are a Terp for life. We offer resources for any life stage, whether you're looking for support to make a career change, have recently retired and want to enjoy learning from Maryland faculty, or just want to volunteer to support your TERP community. We hope that you'll take advantage of all of the different programs that are offered by your alumni association. And if you'd like to learn more about any of these opportunities, feel free to send me an email directly, and I'm happy to share or have a one-on-one chat about ways to get involved. Otherwise, you can find a lot of different opportunities and resources available on our website as well at alumni.umd.edu. So tonight, you'll be hearing from Maggie Much, Senior Admissions Coordinator with the Office of Undergraduate Admissions here at Maryland. And fun fact, Maggie is also a proud TERP alumna who graduated in 2016 with degrees in communication and English literature and language. So we hope that you leave tonight's program with an understanding of how to be a competitive applicant to the University of Maryland, tips for completing your application, as well as how to apply using the two different application platforms, the Common App and the Standout Admissions Network. So just as a reminder, please feel free to pose any questions that you may have during tonight's webinar using the Zoom Q&A feature during the presentation. And we'll continue to answer those questions live after Maggie's presentation. So thank you all so much for being here. And without further ado, let's begin by welcoming Maggie.
Hi, everyone. Wishing you all a very happy Tuesday evening. My name is Maggie Much, as Jess just introduced me. I am absolutely thrilled to be here with you virtually tonight. I know we're not physically on campus, but I'm going to guess that many of us are very familiar with campus because you either are probably an alum yourself if you're joining the call, or a family, friend, or loved one of an alum if you have found yourself on this call today. So whether you have a direct tie to Maryland or an indirect tie, so excited to be with you all. I'm so excited that you may have noticed I've started to answer some of the questions ahead of time in the chat, some of which just to tell you that that I might touch on in the presentation, some of it to answer other doodads. Ash just mentioned, and as you can probably see on Zoom, that Q&A in the bottom section of your screen, that's going to be open the whole time. So any and all questions you have about admissions, please feel free to throw them there. You might notice me not addressing them until the very end. The reason for that is A, I think it'll be a little bit more seamless, and B, we might end up getting to your question on the next slide. So for that reason, I usually do hold questions to the end, but I assure you I will leave ample opportunity to touch each and every question you have about admissions, and anything I can't address, certainly we can follow up via email. All right, without further ado, let's certainly jump on in to our Becoming a Terp webinar. So in truth, I'm going to keep my section here about campus pretty short. If I were going out and visiting a high school in my home state of New Jersey or California or across the globe, somewhere where there may not be the same assumption of connection to the University of Maryland, I might spend a little bit more time here, but I know you're interested in Maryland if you're here tonight, so we're going to keep it a little short and sweet about campus in general. I'll shamelessly plug our campus tour if you want to join us and hear a little bit more about campus and the student perspective, but focusing a lot more of our time and energy tonight on the actual admissions process itself. But I'd be remiss if I didn't share a little bit about the university that I do love so much. You may know that we are about over 30,000 undergraduate students, well over 100 majors to choose from. So truly, we are a very lively campus. We're in College Park, Maryland. We're the only public research institution inside the DC Beltway, the flagship institution of the state of Maryland, and the largest institution in the state of Maryland. So the university is certainly a powerhouse in the DC metro area in the state of Maryland. We have ample opportunities for any kind of student, regardless of what you are studying, what you're passionate about, what you're interested in. We have programming, resources, advising, mentorship on our campus to make sure that whatever your next steps are, your goals after graduation, not only we're going to give you the tools to get there, but to get there successfully and also learning a bit about yourself and your peers as you go. I'm assuming we probably have some pretty big Maryland fans in the Zoom room as well. If you went to Maryland or connected to Maryland, you might be a big Terp fan. I do have to brag because I think it's kind of a fun fact. We are the only NCAA school to have four official school colors. Odds are, again, if you're connected to Maryland, you can probably guess them. If we were in a room, I'd make them guess them out loud right now. But they're, of course, white, red, yellow, and black. You odds are also probably are familiar with our lovely mascot, Tuxedo. He's a terrapin diamondback turtle. So when you come to visit campus next or for the first time, you will certainly see him well represented on our campus as well. Now, as I touched on, we have a little over, and I agree, best flag in the states. We have a little over 90 majors to choose from, excuse me, over 100 majors to choose from on campus. It was 90 when I first started working here, over 100 now because we are constantly growing and evolving. I didn't list each individual major out here just because all 100 would be a little bit too small, even on the Zoom room. But I did divide all of our different schools and colleges into this list. The reason that I do that is because I think a theme, something we can all speak to if we're connected to Maryland, if you went here at some point, is though we are all University of Maryland students, staff, faculty, you may also be a part of the College of Behavior and Social Sciences as a psychology major, or maybe a civil engineering major in the A. James Clark School of Engineering. Within your school and college here, it can feel like a bit of a smaller program that you're in. Your advisor, your peers, you're getting to know them specifically within your major, within your minor, if you're choosing to pursue one. But you still have all the resources and opportunities that a large institution can offer you. Now, I know there's some questions coming in to the chat and to the questions about competitive majors. We do have some programs that we call um, limited enrollment programs, or LEPs for short. Essentially, what that means is they're more competitive majors. And I want to spend a fair bit of time unpacking A, what that means in terms of the admissions process, or B, what that means in terms of how we review applications and applying. So, pin if you're interested in any competitive majors. I'll share what those are in a few slides. Know that we're going to get there in just a few minutes. But here are again all the schools and colleges. If you want to see the individual majors broken down into these different schools and colleges, or just a total list, you can take a look on our website, admissions.umd.edu, or even just Google UMD majors. It'll show you all of these and how they divide into our different schools and colleges. All right, now again, we're going to flip gears over to the admissions pieces here. Oh, sorry, it looks like behind the scenes, folks, I may be maximized, not the slides. I think as I start this slide, in truth, it'll be okay for me to keep discussing this before, as we're in the process of getting it maximized. Jess, if I need to pause or anything, of course, just let me know in the chat. Otherwise, I'm going to keep rocking in the foreground. We will get this maximized in just a second, folks. But I want to take a second to talk about what the admissions office's goal is every year, right? It probably seems straightforward. Our job is to admit students. Yes, it is. That is absolutely our job. But it's a little bit more nuanced than that, and it's um, a little bit more in depth, so to speak. Every year when we sit down as an admission committee and when we are planning, when we are reading applications, when we are making these decisions, we have a goal. And that goal is to not only admit students, but admit students who we feel are A, going to be academically prepared to succeed at the University of Maryland in our rigorous course loads, but B, are also going to be bringing unique perspectives, talents, skills, experiences, worldviews to our university. With over 30,000 undergraduate students, I'm extremely proud to mention that we have students represented from every county in Maryland, from, in most years, almost every state in the United States of America. Typically, well over 100 different countries are represented on our campus, and we feel really strongly that those worldviews and those Maryland views are represented on our campus, which is a long way to say that we use 24 different admission factors to figure out who those students are we are going to admit. And I will say slide wise too. I haven't talked about any details on the slide too. So if you're not seeing it just yet, don't worry. Now, when we sit down to review students for admission, what do we think about? What do we talk about when we are reading an applicant's materials, when we're discussing them as an admission committee? Well, the secret sauce is not so secret. We put our 24 admission factors as well as our statement of philosophy on the admissions website. They're on the slide in front of me right now. So when we send out the recording, you certainly will be able to see them. But you can also see them 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on our website. And I say that really, really, really to be transparent in the fact that we don't want it to be a secret. What we consider or what we don't is very public knowledge. I will say I've been giving this presentation since, gosh, either 2017 or 18 every year to the Alumni Association. I absolutely love it. The only tough thing about tonight is having to deliver some bad news to you all. And that is, and I saw this question earlier in the chat, um, one thing that is not a factor for us is being the child or dependent of an alumni of the university. So for us, if you, your parent, your grandparent, your guardian, your sister, your aunt, your uncle, your weatherman, whoever it may be, if they did not or did attend the University of Maryland, it's a neutral point of interest. It's not something we're considering in our review factors. I know that can be tough news when, as parents, guardians, loved ones, we have that special tie to the university, and we certainly want our children, our dependents, our friends, our family to go to Maryland and love Maryland as much as we do. But they can certainly rest assured knowing that, admission. Is fully based on their merit and not any, prior connection to the university as well. Again, these 24 factors, if anyone's having a hard time seeing them, they are on our website. I can drop the link to them in just a few minutes. It looks like we're working on getting them adjusted. So we will get you there in just a second. I promise. What I'm sharing out loud isn't on the slide. So if you lock in with me, I will keep you good to go. Don't you worry. One thing you will notice when you do take a look at these 24 factors, if they're too small for you right now, whether that be later tonight or when you're getting ready to work on your application, is about a third of them are academic in nature. For us, a student's ability to succeed and to keep up with the rigorous coursework at the University of Maryland. Okay, there we go. Beautiful. I think we have spotlighted my video, so hopefully things are a little bit easier to see now too. You'll see less of me, but more of the slides, and that's probably a good thing. About a third of our factors are academic in nature. For us, that's often the biggest piece of the puzzle. And for consideration, certainly we are looking at everything I've listed here on the slides, but academics are that bigger piece. Now, outside of academics, you're going to notice there's a lot of things that we're considering. For example, I mentioned geographic origin. We feel really strongly that as the state flagship of the state of Maryland, that Maryland is represented on our campus. And that doesn't just mean, Central Maryland. That certainly means all four corners, Central Maryland as well, Western, Southern. Geographic origin. We want to make sure as many international students and from different states are accepted. And it's certainly not to say that this is a point system where being from a specific place hurts or helps your application. But in the same way, again, we want the world and Maryland represented on our campus. Those are things we're thinking about. And that's just one of the factors I'm pulling out here. Other factors you'll notice may feel like a really big part of your story, or in some cases, not at all. For example, extracurricular activities. You might be someone who is super engaged in your community or your high school or your religious organization, and you have a lot of extracurriculars to share. And if that's the case, absolutely. I promise you, we are not only interested, but we're excited to learn about it. But maybe student B over here has zero extracurriculars on their resume, but maybe they work outside of the classroom and that takes up a fair bit of time. Maybe student C, they don't have any work experience, they don't have any extracurricular experience, but maybe they have a very special role at home. Maybe they pick up a sibling from middle school or grade school and help them get homework done and get dinner on the table. Maybe they help be a caretaker to a grandparent. A long way to say these 24 factors are not a rubric, nor is it a set percentage each is a part of your story. Community involvement. You might be incredibly involved in your community. Fantastic. We'd love to hear about. English as a second language. I'm from the Garden State, the great state of New Jersey, as I'm sure many of our Zoomers are joining us from there tonight. And I was born and bred there. English is my first and only language. For me, that is just not a factor of my story. Now, my best friend growing up across the street moved here when we were in fifth grade and didn't speak English until she moved here and then had to learn it. So, the long way to say that's a pretty big part of her lived experience. So, don't think of these 24 factors as a rubric where, if one isn't a significant part of your experience or your story, you're losing points or gaining points. Really, it's just to give us the chance to talk about not only the academic skills that you might bring to the university, but the perspectives, the talents, the experiences. And you'll really get a chance to discuss these holistically. Something that is not on this list, and I'm going to unpack it a little bit more later, is the major that you're interested in. We review applications major blind, and I'll talk about that in just a few slides. Again, the secret sauce, not too secret. If you're interested, these are up on our website and you can take a look at some point. All right. So, how do we get a sense of how those 24 factors are a part of your story? It comes down to about five, maybe four, if we are not using one. And I'll talk about what that means just a second. Different materials. I don't want to undermine what our current rising seniors, they're going to put a lot of work into this application, but it can boil down to five fingers, four, maybe if we're going test optional. Now, the first is the application itself. I have very, very, very exciting news for my rising seniors, those who are starting their senior year this coming fall. Our application actually opened up yesterday. Now, that does not mean you need to close your laptop right now and get started on it, but just to know ahead of senior year, if you want to start making some progress on it, as of yesterday, you can get going. Now, in the application itself is where we're going to learn a lot of your basic demographic information, your name, your date of birth, where you're going to high school, if you've engaged with college classes, information along those lines. It's also going to include what we call your essay. Now, the University of Maryland does not have an essay specific to our application. What we use are the general prompts or personal statement for the common application. Now, we are on two different application platforms. Students get to choose which one is going to be best for them, but the essays are the same regardless of which application platform they use. The truth is, the applications look almost exactly the same except for the logo at the top. I digress. The essay typically is about 5 to 7 options depending on the year. And of those options, always one of them is kind of a create your own essay option. Now, certainly you are welcome to speak about Maryland if you would want to, but I often remind students I know my admission committee knows about the University of Maryland. If you would like to speak about Maryland, that is more than okay, as long as you are still the subject of that essay. We recognize that there's a lot going on. And even without asking for an essay, we're asking a lot of you by getting this application in by November 1st of your senior year. It's really our hope that that non-specific to the university essay can help streamline this process a little bit, but still allow us to learn about you. So a long way to say, if your essay, doesn't mention Rutgers or Michigan, you are so okay to use that essay for the same application to Maryland, those other institutions that might be on your radar, whomever it may be. Really, as long as we're learning about you, that's what we're interested in. If you think about it, the essay is kind of uniquely one of the few places we actually get to hear your voice as a student come through. Yes, I get to hear your teacher speak about you in their letter of recommendation, but this is your own voice. And that's what makes it genuinely such a pleasure for us as an admission committee to review. There is no secret, one formula works. If you want to talk about a past experience, a future goal, a difficult circumstance that you overcame, even in the mundane, there's so much you could write about. As long as we're learning about you, I promise you, we're interested. Again, we don't have a Maryland specific essay. We do have a couple of short answers. I think we give space up to 600 characters. It's not to say you need to use all 600. It's filling in the end of a sentence, maybe a second sentence if you have a lot to say about that question. For example, one of the questions that we've asked for many, many years now at this point, even back when I applied, it was on the application many years ago, is the best thing about last Thursday, I think it's actually this year, Monday, was blank. And there's no secret, that we're looking for some specific code word that's going to equal auto admit. Really, it's just a way to get to know you and how you might, address those questions a little bit better. They can also be very helpful, those short answer questions, in when we are reviewing for things like what we call our living and learning programs. And I'll talk about those in a few slides. That's all in the application itself, as well as your activities and award sheet or resume of the sorts. Again, any and all things you've worked on, been a part of throughout high school, whether it was a month, whether it was a year, I promise you, we're interested. Certainly think outside the box or the high school box too as well. It is wonderful if you're involved in your high school, love to see it. But if you're not involved at all in your high school, don't forget to think about places that you might be, whether it's working, whether it's having a special role in your family or home, whether it's your religious organization or your community. It doesn't have to be happening in your high school for it to be significant to us. I promise you, we're interested. Outside of that application itself with the essay and activity sheet, we're going to need one teacher and one counselor letter of recommendation. Those are both required for our application and give us some good context. The teacher, of course, can speak to you in the classroom. The counselor, A, can speak to you, but also B, also gives us a little bit of insight into what's going on at your school. They typically will share with us what we call a school profile that might go over information such as the GPA scale you use. And I'll talk about GPA in just a second. It might share things like how many AP honors IB or rigorous and classes are offered. It might share limitations. If students can't take AP Bio and AP Psych at the same time because they're offered at the same time, sometimes that information is in that profile. Often it's just a very helpful way to get additional context about your high school that you're attending to give us more information about you, what's going on, and what's available. If you have a third or fourth letter provider you feel very strongly about, absolutely you're welcome to include it. My one little caveat that I always just kind of throw out there, my personal take, is to consider what might be different about that letter of recommendation. And what I mean by that is, if you're thinking about having your coach or club advisor, you know, drumline leader or theater director write you, your employer, a letter of rec, that's probably going to have a bit of a different context than your teacher and counselor. Whereas if you ask your bio teacher and your chem teacher, they might have something different to say, but the concept, might be coming from the same place. Teachers, to my understanding, it is typically not in their contract for this to be part of their job, duties. It's kind of other duties as assigned. A long way to say why I'm sure they are often honored to write these letter of recommendation. It is an ask from them, and I think we just want to be mindful about not asking 12 teachers when maybe we could ask one, maybe two, if we really feel they could add something different to our application. In terms of transcripts, probably not too surprising, we are going to ask for a copy of your official high school transcripts. Maybe surprisingly, while we see your GPA, we're not really going off of that in our review. And allow me to expand because I know that probably does sound quite crazy. The truth is, even in the state of Maryland, the GPA scales can be quite different district to district, county to county, independent school to private school to public school. There are some school systems where straight A's in the most demanding coursework you could possibly take is a 4.9. There are some schools where straight A's in the most demanding coursework you could possibly take is a 4.0. And there are schools in New York that use a 100 scale. So often if we were comparing, GPA to GPA to GPA, school to school, it would like be comparing apples to oranges to grapes. Yeah, they're all fruit, but they're different kinds of fruit. And it really isn't fair for us to be reviewing you if you're at a 4.0 GPA scale school to someone who's at a 100 scale. So a long way to say, when I share our timelines, our deadlines, and our releases in the next slide, I promise you it's a good thing that it takes us a long time to review these applications because we're looking at your whole transcript in addition to your whole application. Instead of looking at, okay, Maggie has a 4.0 GPA, what we're going to do as a admission committee is start in ninth grade and work our way through each academic year. Ninth grade, all right, what classes did I take and what grades did I earn? Same thing with 10th grade, same thing with 11th grade. We're paying attention to trend. Were my grades consistently strong? Did I have an upward trend? Were there any downward trends? And trend, certainly in grades, but also in rigor. How did I challenge myself in ninth grade versus 10th grade versus 11th grade? And that might look different student to student, high school to high school. It is not to say that you are expected to take every rigorous class at your high school. Certainly that is not the case. But if you are at a school with 50, rigorous classes available versus a student who's at a high school with 10 versus a third student who has 0, the context is what it looks like to challenge yourself in your school is a little bit different. Same thing with student to student. If I even have an identical, let's say, twin sister, and we both start ninth grade at the same school, I might be taking a different level of rigor than her. And where I started ninth grade might look different from, Susie Q across the street or my sister across the room. A long way to say it's your individual context and journey we're looking at and the context of, what's available to you. If you are applying to our early action deadline, we will not see your senior year grades, but we will see the courses that you're registered for. So, in terms of keeping up with the challenging course load, that's certainly very important and something we discuss as an admission committee. I will talk about, you know, the timelines and why early action is so important in just a few minutes as well. If you are someone who went to a different institution, maybe you transferred from a New York school to a Minnesota school or Minnesota to Maryland, whatever it may be, and you attended more than one high school, we do ask that you send us the original copy of that high school's transcript as well. We just want to make sure that we're giving you credit for any rigor, the grades there. If it's pass fail on your new transcript, we want to make sure we're looking at that. But if your current school has a copy, that certainly works more than fine. If you are someone who's taken advantage of college level courses, so I wouldn't mean taking AP or IB in your high school. I mean, physically, I'm taking a class at, Towson this summer, or I'm gaining credit through Prince George's Community College in this dual enrollment or early college program. And if you've completed those courses, we ask that you send us a copy of those transcripts as well. So just a quick recap there. If you have completed college work, please send us a copy of those transcripts. If it's already on your high school transcripts because you took it in the class in the school, that's fine. Or if you're in progress of it senior year and you don't have grades, of course, that's okay too. Here's where it gets a little interesting because you get an option here. You get to tell us if you would or would not like your SAT scores and or ACT scores considered. Now, what does that look like in our review? This is our fifth or sixth year being test optional. And for us, what that means and what that looks like is when you sit down, you will say, yes, I would like my test scores considered, or no, I would not. In practice, when we sit down to talk about your application as an admission committee, what that means is we would either have 24 factors or 23 if you decide to go test optional. So I know often a question I'm asked is, okay, so will you assume that my scores are bad, quote unquote, because I didn't send them? No, you might have a 1600, but for whatever reason didn't want to send it. If you don't send it, that's okay. We're not theorizing. There's no conjecture. It's just not a part of your review. I kind of think about it this way. You may have had a history class this past year that had 5 exams to get to your final grade, and maybe your literature class had 4 exams to get to your final grade. You got to the final grade the same way. It was just one additional review factor with 5 tests versus 4 tests for this class. Same thing if you choose to use test scores. Again, it's 24 factors are considered and 23 if not. If you choose either path in the road, you are locked in after you hit submit on the application. So that would mean if you say, yes, I would like my test scores considered, we are not, your application would not be considered complete until your official test scores are on file. On the flip side of that, if I say, no, I do not want my test scores considered, and then next week I go and I sit down and I get a perfect score on the ACT, I can't then send my score in because I already submitted my application and said, no, I don't want my scores considered. It can be a very personal and big decision in some ways. The truth is, it might very well be the case that you decide to send your scores to Maryland and not another institution, to another institution and not Maryland. Because A, they will be used for your admission review, and B, if you decide to use them or not, either way, we would also then, consider them for our merit scholarship review, LEP review, which I'll talk about in a few minutes. And like most institutions, when we went test optional, our averages tended to take a pretty big jump. We are still, believe it or not, even though it's almost the start of the school year, people think admission ends May 1st. We're still wrapping up fall 2025, which is our next upcoming class. So we will have the updated averages on our website, likely in early September once the cycle is fully wrapped down. But to give you a sense for fall 2024, of the students that we admitted who wanted test scores considered, 50% of them fell between a 1440 and 1540 on the SAT and a 32 to 34 on the ACT. It is not, let me be clear, not, underline, circle, highlight, not to suggest that scores below those ranges aren't strong and aren't competitive and aren't reflective of a very, strong testing day. But typically, if that's our middle 50%, it's not going down year to year. And my candid advice to students would be if your scores are below that, I have not seen the middle 50% ever go down. So I would consider probably waiving them if my scores were below last year's middle 50%. Again, it is a personal choice. You may decide to send your scores and your twin sister doesn't. You might send them to Maryland and not to Towson. You might send them to Towson and not to Maryland. It's a personal choice. It does not take you out of the running from any major, any special program, or any of our scholarships. Nor does it mean you can't be a Division I athlete. So in terms of the review, it doesn't take away anything regardless of what you choose, and very much so up to students. Timing wise for this policy, we are test optional through 2027. So those of you who will be applying later on, just stay tuned when we get closer to your admission cycle. And certainly I can touch on any questions about that at the end of the presentation as well. We are still making some final decisions about, I know there's some new options in terms of the ACT and science sections. As of now, we are requiring it, but we will figure out if anything changes. And if it does, update our website. Last but not least here, it's not a material you're sending in, but rather one you're going to get access to. That's what we call the Terp application portal, or TAP for short. Essentially, this is just going to be a place where you can log in and view the status of your application materials after you hit submit. So if I submit tonight, I can then see, oh wow, my letters of recommendation have arrived, my transcript. That way you can make sure that everything is here for the deadline. Documents can take a few days to process. So why we don't start reviewing any earlier than our deadlines, I typically tell students, save yourself from having a scary Halloween, aim to have things in a little bit ahead of time. Before we go further into the admissions process, because I'm going to spend a little bit more time talking about decisions you can expect, review for competitive majors, I want to talk about our deadlines because November 1st is incredibly important. November 1st is our early action deadline. I'm about to throw a huge, huge, huge number your way. We take 90% of our freshman class from early action. Oh my gosh, that is a jump scare. That's a lot. And I don't say that to make regular sound completely unachievable or scary, maybe a little bit to scare you into applying early action. But I'm in the business of admissions. I want to say yes to your application. It's hard to do in our regular deadline because we've already admitted 90% of our freshman class from early action. And early action typically is going to take up the bulk of the space. Now, college has a lot of jargon in it, and I want to unpack and define something here. Early action means that it's just earlier, and in our process, it's going to give you best consideration. What it does not mean is that if you are admitted, you have to come to Maryland. I'm a little biased. I went here, I work here, I love this university. I hope that you're very excited if you get admitted, but you don't have to go to Maryland. Nor does applying to our early action deadline prevent you from going what's called early decision, which is binding to another institution, or applying early to other schools. But again, this will A, give you best consideration for admission. I'm asked every year, what's the best advice for my application? Applying early action is unequivocally my hands down number one answer. B, applying early action is also going to automatically review our applicants for all of our special programs, including our honors college. Students in our regular deadline are not reviewed for our special programs, and I'll talk about those in a few slides. Last but certainly not least, all students who apply to our early action deadline are automatically reviewed for our merit-based scholarships, whereas students in regular are not. There is really, in truth, no downside to applying early action and a lot of downsides to applying regular. More competitive, no scholarships, no special programs, and you hear back later. I really, really, really encourage students, don't even look up the regular deadline. Focus in on November 1st because A, all those benefits I mentioned, and B, you'll hear back from us by February 1st, which gives you through May 1st, that confirmation deadline, to visit campus, to ask questions, to explore. And that way, when you sign on the dotted line, you feel very comfortable and confident that, yes, this is 100% the right decision for you and the decision you'd like to make. All right, so by February 1st, when those decisions go out, what will you know at that point? A few things, and I'm going to walk us through all of them right now. The first is program invites. I've used this phrase living and learning a few times now. I know I talked about with the majors, we're a large university and Maryland can break down into these smaller communities across campus. Living and learning programs are a really great example of how that can happen in another way. Now, our two largest living and learning programs on campus are what we call the Honors College and College Park Scholars. Both of them think kind of as umbrellas. So, for example, within honors, everyone is certainly in the honors college, but there is a bunch of sub programs within it. So, you might be in the advanced cybersecurity honors program, or honors humanities, or the honors business program. Same thing with College Park Scholars. There's several different thematic programs within it, some of which focus on environmental science, the arts, public leadership, and these don't necessarily have to correlate with your major. You may be a computer science major and be in that advanced cybersecurity honors program, but you could also be a history major and be in that ACES advanced cybersecurity honors program. It can be a really great way to emphasize an area of your major or minor that you're passionate about, or it can be a really great way to diversify what you're studying at the university. With all of these programs, students are coming from different majors, they're coming from different high schools, different backgrounds, but we'll have some common thread that pulls them together. Maybe it is that passion for public leadership. Maybe it's an interest in the arts or humanities. And our thought and hope is that having that common interest is going to really help foster a sense of community early on. Typically, these programs, each individual one, are no larger than about 25 to 70 students. We also have some smaller ones called Carillon Communities and FIRE, which is the first year innovative research experience. And the good news, again, to most of my rising seniors out there, is there's nothing, again, extra you have to do to be reviewed for these programs beyond applying to our early action deadline. So when you get your letter back on February 1st, you'll know A, if you've been offered admission, and B, if you were invited to one of these special programs. If it was honors or scholars, and then you need to rank the thematic programs you want to be a part of, it'll give you direction to do so. But again, the big headline, nothing extra you need to do to be reviewed beyond applying early action. Now, some majors, as I mentioned a little bit earlier at the university, are what we call limited enrollment programs, or LEPs for short. I can be the first to admit that the word limited has a negative connotation, right? It can be scary to use language like that. So let's take a moment to just kind of unpack what that means in the sense of right now when you're applying and then after you're admitted to the University of Maryland. Now, the reason we have these LEP majors is the same across the board. We want to ensure that students in any major at the university not only are able to meet with their advisor when it's required, but when they want to, that they can sign up for the classes they need, that they're interested in, that they can take advantage of the outside of the classroom experiences that are associated with their program of study without there not being enough space, without there not being enough classes. And in order to do that and make sure we maintain the prestige of those programs and the resources we can offer students, we just have to limit how many students are enrolled in those each given year or semester. This is a little bit of a peek behind the curtain, but these programs go through reevaluations every couple years to make sure it still makes sense that they're a limited enrollment program. For example, communication. If anyone has older students or was a comm major like I was when they were at Maryland, you may have been there when it was an LEP, and that just changed this past summer. And that has nothing to do with the prestige of the program and everything to do with the fact that if we have space in the major, we typically will no longer make it an LEP. But I digress. These tend to be our most popular majors. And again, for that reason, we have to limit how many students are enrolled in them. Now, the big headline here, and if you stop listening, let this be what you take away, is in terms of admission for both freshmen and transfer students, we review major blind. So whether you are interested in one of these LEPs, whether you're interested in whatever ends up being the least popular major this coming year, or you're undecided, does not have an impact on your admission decision itself. So we sit down and we first say, yes, I would like to admit Maggie to the University of Maryland, not paying mind to what my major is. Now, if the admission committee says, yes, we are going to admit Maggie, and we see that I'm interested in one of these limited enrollment programs, there may be an additional review of my application by a committee for that program for new freshmen. And I'll talk about transfers later on. Now, that decision for the major doesn't impact my admission decision. So if, let's say, the computer science, the committee who reviews for computer science major says, no, we're not going to offer Maggie admission directly to the computer science major as a new freshman, that does not change the fact that the admission committee has said, yes, this is all happening behind the scenes before I get my letter. But what it means is when I open up my admission letter, it'll either say, yes, Maggie, you've been admitted to the University of Maryland and directly to your first choice of major, pretty straightforward. Or I might see that I'm actually in what we call letters and sciences, which is our undecided, undeclared major. And that would mean that I was not offered direct admission to my first choice of major. Because we are major blind and it doesn't impact, hurt, or help your chance of admission, whatever you are truly interested in studying, I encourage students to put down on their application. Now, of course, the question becomes, if I don't get into my first choice of major, what does that mean and what does that look like? With almost all of these, except for two, computer science and business, I'll talk about in just a second, they have what we call non-competitive admission for current students. A mouthful way to say that if students come to Maryland and they take them and they meet the minimum requirements to enter this major, it shouldn't be a surprise when they apply. They know if they do meet them, they'll be admitted to the program. And if they don't, they will be not. So engineering, for example, if I don't get into engineering right now as a new freshman, but I am indeed admitted to the university, as long as I come to Maryland and I meet what we call the gateway requirements, some requirements for this major. In engineering, just to give you an example, it's a physics class in Calc 2 with a B minus or greater, a chemistry course with a C minus or greater, and a 3.0. If I come to Maryland, I check those boxes and apply into engineering, it shouldn't be a surprise to me. I know ahead of time because I have met those requirements, I'm going to be admitted to that major. And if I didn't, I wouldn't be. So pretty straightforward in terms of a pathway to your first program of study, except for our two that have a competitive admission. And it is not to say that that's off the table for you, but their review is a little bit different. So with business and computer science, if students are not admitted as a freshman to that major, but they are admitted to the university, they can apply one time as what we call an internal transfer student, a student at Maryland looking to transfer majors. Now, with business and computer science, what makes them a little bit different from those other programs is they still have competitive admission for current students. A long way to say that if you meet the minimum requirements, you still are reviewed holistically like you would be applying to an institution for admission to the major. So computer science, for example, if I wasn't admitted as a new freshman, I can come to Maryland and take 3 classes in that major and then reapply into it and be reviewed at that point. Computer science is kind of uniquely also our exception that it has the most competitive admission for current students. And we strongly encourage students who are not directly admitted as a freshman to, even if they're pursuing it as an internal transfer student, have a parallel plan about what they may study if they're not admitted. Computer science is by far and large our most popular and largest major. And unfortunately, that has just led to it being ultra competitive. Because it does not impact your chance of admission. If you're interested in computer science as a freshman applicant, I do really strongly, suggest that students put it down on their application. That way, they're reviewed as a new freshman. If they're admitted, wonderful, and if they're not, you can certainly pursue it as a current student. Business still also has that competitive review, but it's a bit less competitive than computer science for current students. The real headlines you need to take away right now, though, in truth, is whatever you're interested, put down on your application. And if you're not directly admitted, we start all of our admitted student open houses with our students who do not get directly into one of those programs, with sessions talking about what that looks like, the process of pursuing your major, and other opportunities as well. Now let's pivot back to admissions decisions themselves, and then I promise you we'll leave plenty of time for questions. There are a few different decisions you could expect when applying to University of Maryland as a new freshman. The first is somewhat straightforward. Now, when you are applying in your senior year of high school, typically you're applying to enter a university for the following fall. So if I was a senior right now, I'm very likely applying to be enter the fall of 2026. So I open up my letter and it says, "Congrats, Maggie, you've been into the fall of 2026." Pretty straightforward. Good to go there. Something that's a little bit different about Maryland is we will actually also review a student for the spring without them asking us to do so. And let me back up a little bit why I explain that. Every year for decades and decades and decades, we've had the same problem. We have way more students apply who could very well be a good fit for the university than we physically have space for in our fall class. Now, in the spring, we have students who have either graduated a semester early, a semester late, who have gone abroad, who have maybe transferred to another institution that's a better fit, and a long way to say we have more space in the spring. So what that means is if we decide as an admission committee that we are not going to offer an applicant admission to the fall, before we release that decision, we're then also going to automatically review them for the spring. And if we offer a student spring admission, they would be alerted to that in their admission letter. It might say, "Congrats, Maggie, you've been admitted to the spring of 2027." And that's great. But that might make you go, "All right, well, then what am I going to do for fall 2026? That's when I was supposed to be starting college, when all my friends are going." You have a couple of different options. And I should mention being admitted to the spring is not conditional. So it's not you have to do X, Y, Z to maintain that spring admission. You are fully admitted to the spring. You could spend that fall semester at another 4-year school, at a 2-year institution, working, interning, studying abroad, or in about somewhere between 1,000 and 1,500 students typically choose this option. You can join us that fall through something we call Freshman Connection. Now, Freshman Connection is a program through the University of Maryland that allows students to still take a full course load of classes. They're Maryland classes, they're Maryland professors, but they're in what we call off-peak hours that first semester. So Monday to Thursday after 3 p.m. and anytime Friday. Really, the T is we just have additional classroom space available and the ability to instruct more students at that time. After that first semester, your classes are at any other time, like any other student, and you're not, ostracized or sent to any particular part of campus. You are living with other students. You can live on campus as long as you submit your housing form on time. When I was a student, freshman connection students lived off campus. Not a bad thing, but admittedly a little bit of a different experience if you want that on campus, perspective. But really, really beyond your classes being a little bit later for one semester, your experience is nearly exactly the same. So if you open up that letter and it says spring 2027, let's party, let's celebrate, you're admitted. That's good news. Now, another possible decision would be we are not able to offer you admission now, but you are on a wait list for admission. In truth, we are not a school that maintains a particularly large wait list. Something I think that can definitely be, I'll take off my Maryland hat and just be my person hat for a second, that can be difficult about college admissions is things can be a little bit different or a little bit the same school to school. There are institutions that heavily utilize their wait list each year. We tend not to, just being candid, but there are, and we tend to keep it very, very small. There is a chance that some students might open up their letter and it says, as of right now, you are not offered admission to the University of Maryland, but you are on a wait list and we will let you know by XYZ date the status. The tough, candid advice I often give students is let's start planning and thinking as if this doesn't change. If it does, let's go, come on down to campus. But if not, let's talk about transferring. Let's talk about becoming a Terp that way. And that leads me to certainly the least fun decision to talk about is not offered admission. Technically, I can only speak on behalf of the University of Maryland, but I'm not so naive to think that there aren't other schools that some of our students in the Zoom room have at the top of their list right now, and that's okay too. If you are not admitted to Maryland or any other school, please, please, please remember no now is not no forever unless you let it be. And I say that to mean we have so many wonderful transfer students join us. We have about somewhere between 1,700 to 2,000 transfer students typically join us each fall and a little under 1,000 each spring. So not only are you not transferring alone, but you are transferring in a very big and robust class. Whether you are choosing to pursue an associate's degree right off the bat because it's a better financial option for you and your family, or you were not admitted throughout the somewhat more competitive freshman review, transferring can be an incredible pathway. And one of the best kept secrets about college at large is whether I graduated from the University of Maryland, after I got here for 4 years or 2 years or 1 year, my diploma looks exactly the same. So transferring can be a really great option for access both financially and if you were not admitted as a new freshman. I won't go over everything here, but just to share roughly what makes a competitive transfer student. For us, it's about a B average over 30 college credits, including fundamental math and English, so lower level math and college writing. Typically, 30 credits is going to look like one academic year, and that can give us a sense of, how you're starting to perform in the college classroom. I'm not going to spend too much time here because I want to keep us time conscious and make sure I leave plenty of time for questions. But truly, truly, whether it's a week after decisions go out or a month, I know that sometimes this news is hard and I want to give you time to process it. If you're not ready to talk about a transfer pathway 1 minute after you heard you weren't admitted, I get it. I wouldn't be either. But guess what? We're not going anywhere in the admissions office. If you want to talk about transferring a year later, 2 years later, 50 years later, you want to come back for another degree, we are here and we're interested in talking to you about it. To quickly wrap us up here on financing your education, in terms of need-based financial aid, the FAFSA is what we use in the financial aid office to review and package students for financial aid. And then for merit-based scholarships, the early action application is what we will use to review you there. You will not know about merit-based scholarships from our office until early March. That's why I think it's very important to emphasize that it's non-binding when you apply early action, because if you need to wait till this piece of the puzzle looks like before you sign on the dotted line to become a Terp, you are so welcome to do so. You got plenty of time ahead of May 1st. Whew, I know I've thrown a lot at y'all in a relatively short period of time. Again, as I said, I'm from New Jersey, so clearly for my Jersey peeps out there, we have no problem yapping and talking. We can do it. But I want to make sure we address any of the questions I didn't cover as we went through. So I will invite my wonderful colleague Jess back, and we will get rocking to address and answer any and all questions.
Yay. Thank you so much, Maggie, for that extremely informative presentation. We will now open the floor, and I know there's a bunch of folks that have already commented some questions that I've been waiting for Maggie to answer. So we'll just go ahead and jump right into it. So the first question that we have here is machine learning in the computer science major more competitive compared to the others?
Oh, that's a great question. Yeah. So for someone who may not be familiar, also let me just speak a little larger to this for the other folks in the room. In our computer science major, we have a couple of different concentrations. So your diploma doesn't look differently, but you might be able to choose to concentrate in machine learning, artificial intelligence, um, quantum science is another path, or plain original computer science, if you will. We consider the major kind of all in the same in terms of admission. So if you're interested in one of those concentrations, they're no more or less competitive. Same thing if you're interested in management versus finance versus accounting, all within our School of Business, equally competitive. And once you're in, you can switch between them. And same thing with engineering. If you come into Maryland and you're admitted to mechanical engineering, and then you start, oh no, May 2nd, I realize I really want to do electrical, not mechanical. That's okay. To us, once you're admitted to the actual LEP, you can switch between the kind of sub programs, if you will.
Great. So as far as the 24 factors go that you had mentioned earlier, are they weighted equally?
Good question. So, yes and no. I would say there's not really this is such a, I hope this doesn't sound like a terrible cop out, but it's more so that they will hold different weight for different students. I think academics hold the largest weight, truthfully and candidly, in our process. As our application volume grows, academics are one of the largest things we're certainly talking about. But like I mentioned, we want to make sure we have all of Maryland represented. So, geographic origin, involvement. We want to make sure we're inviting a very diverse class. That means that those factors might be big and small parts of your stories. So if one doesn't feel like it resonates, don't worry, it's okay. It's probably just less of a sliding scale for you. Some other parts might be really huge factors.
Great. And then Maggie, there's some questions about if you don't mind putting up the last slide
Yes, I can certainly
again.
do that. It's funny. I happen to be scrolling in the exact same spot. I didn't realize I could put that up with the speed
There
of
we
lightning.
go.
Um,
Um,
and I can put in the chat as well the contact information for our office.
Perfect. The next question that we have, so kind of along the ideas of the 24 factors. So one of the criticisms is that they overwhelmingly benefit the wealthy. How does Maryland's model account for late bloomers or those with fewer resources?
Yeah, no, I think that's certainly a great option. And in truth, the reason that we use what we call holistic admissions and 24 factors is to give us the chance to talk about those. If we were purely just going off of data driven, this test score and this SAT score, and those above that range, you're in, and those below it, you're not. Or if we made some formula, this amount of AP scores, I think that would be problematic in truth, and we wouldn't be inviting, such a well-rounded freshman class. The reason that we look at those 24 factors is to, again, give us a chance to talk about those. If a student, I'll speak to Cecil County, for example. I recruit in Cecil and Harford County here in the great state of Maryland. And sometimes in some of my schools, the resources are just simply different than what is available in another school district. For example, in Cecil County, there is only one college fair. Instead of the individual high schools having their college fairs, there's a countywide fair, and it's beautiful and it's wonderful. And if you're from Cecil, shameless plug, I hope to see you there this October. But that's very different than, say, a school where they're having their own individual college fair. Maybe they're getting higher touch from a lot of colleges visiting. If a student is able to share with us, I'm from I don't know, the eastern shore of Maryland, and where I am particularly from is so rural that we didn't get high-speed Wi-Fi until last year, or we still don't have it. That's context that we can talk about, where if we don't have those 24 factors, we're just looking at GPA or just looking at academics, we don't really have that same ability to talk about holistic admission, so to speak.
Mhm. Um, and then the next kind of slew of questions are around test scores and testing. So, could you just repeat the middle, I think it was the middle 50% for the
Oh,
SAT?
yes, yes, absolutely. So, and I should say the little caveat, I think I mentioned this earlier. We are still wrapping down fall 25. So this is fall 2024 classes profile. So fall 25 should be online probably by early September after we wrap down the cycle, but 1440 to 1540 on the SAT, and 32 to 34 on the ACT. Again, I think it's important for me to highlight and underline that is not to suggest that if you score below those are not strong scores. But that's what happens when you go test optional scores who typically would have brought down that middle 50, they tend to waive those, and it tends to take a bit of a climb. So it might very well be the case you waive them here and not elsewhere, or you waive them on in and we're happy to use them.
And then speaking of waiving SAT scores, do you have any advice or thoughts around like What SAT score threshold is advised to submit versus not submitting?
Yeah, in truth, it's a little in some, and I promise I'm not using this as a cop out either. I really can't ever 100% say to you, don't send your scores or do, because I review applications, right? So if I give you direct guidance and you say Maggie Much told me this, that could be difficult. That being said, my advice, and I think I'm pretty candid about it in truth, is if you are below our middle 50 for the prior year, or towards the bottom of it, I think waiving your scores makes sense. And again, it is not to suggest that, if you're towards the bottom of our middle 50, they're not strong, but I've never seen our middle 50 stay stagnant, nor have I seen it gone down. So if you're towards the bottom of it or below it, I think waiving your scores makes sense because and of how many, I saw that second piece too, I'll address that. In terms of how we use the scores, it's A for admission, but B also for merit-based scholarships. And typically, students awarded scholarships tend to be at the very top of that middle 50 or above it. And actually, good news, this is really important context. I'm sorry I didn't share this earlier. I just saw Dan, thank you. Shout out to Dan F in the chat. 50% of our applicants have this past year chose to use their test scores, and of those we admitted, 50% of them had them. It is kind of teetered and tottered throughout the years between somewhere between about 47 to 52% of our students wanted to waive their scores. It's always been interestingly very close to about 50%. We, of course, cannot control how many students choose to use their scores. What we can control, though, in our office is kind of the breakdown of who they are. And we certainly don't want to get to a place where either population is over rewarded or punished. So happy to report that it's a 50-50 split. Last year, 50% wanted them used, and of those we admitted, 50% had test scores.
Great. So continuing on with the test scores, do you select per school whether to send the SAT/ACT scores? For instance, could you select it for it to be sent to school A but not to school B?
Yes, you can do that. So, and also I should mention, if you send the University of Maryland a 0 on the SAT and you said, I want my test scores considered, doesn't matter. We don't care. So even if you accidentally, I know sometimes if you already wrote down like junior year, maybe you did it in school testing day, we somehow already have your scores on file. If you say you don't want them used here, we will not use them. That might not necessarily be the case at every school you're applying to. Some it might be if they're on file, they'll be used. But A, yes, you can choose just not send them to us. And B, even if you accidentally do, as long as your answer in the application is don't use them, I ain't looking at them.
Great. And then if someone wants to submit a test score, is there a preference for ACT or SAT?
Good question. No preference. The only thing is if you send both, we'll use whatever best benefit you. So sometimes students, it's like a nominal difference. We don't convert the exams because they are different exams. We don't use a concordance. I wouldn't want to translate your ACT into an SAT. They're two different exams. But if we see that your ACT score is higher than your SAT in terms of like our profile, we would use that. And if you did really, really well on one and not the other, and you only want to send it to us, that's perfectly fine too.
Great. So moving along from SAT and ACT, but more about AP scores, can AP scores be sent or not separately from the ACT and SAT scores?
Good question. So I stopped screen sharing briefly because I will also in the background put a link to this chart here. But we do not actually consider AP scores in our admissions review. For that reason, I usually tell students and families, wait to send your scores until you know that you're admitted and that you plan to come to Maryland just because there's a cost. But the university does grant credit for a fair bit of courses through AP, IB, other prior learning credit. And I'll drop in the chat in just a second a link to that page that goes over all of those.
Great. The next question is around letters of recommendation. So, can a letter of recommendation come from a grad student that you interned for?
Oh, perfect. I was going to start sneakily answering that one in the background. Yes, it certainly may. If it's a person outside of the teacher and counselor role, keep that as your third additional one, so to speak. Because we're still going to need your teacher and counselor to consider your application complete. But we're happy to read that additional one and add it to your file.
Yep. And then who should write the counselor letter if you are a homeschooled student?
Yeah, in truth, that's a little bit different, right? Because you might wear as parent, guardian, counselor, teacher, principal. You might wear several different hats. Lunch provider. That is okay. That's a little bit different. That's where you might end up writing the counselor and the teacher, one or the other. Sometimes with homeschooled students, if parent is instructor and isn't comfortable writing both, my suggestion is if you work with kind of an overarching homeschooled organization or company, the letter can come from that as kind of the role of the counselor. But if not, or otherwise, we're happy to have it come from one parent, two parents, guardians, whoever is doing the instruction. That's perfectly fine. If you feel strongly about having, maybe you happen to take a class outside of your home, maybe you're going to a local community college and you want to have an extra letter, great. But if it's coming from the same provider because you're homeschooled, that's a little different. That's totally fine.
Great. Question about the short answer question. So each of those short answers questions appear to have 650 words maximum. I'm assuming these replies should be short in nature, closer to like 100 words or so. Is that correct?
Exactly. Yeah. So it doesn't necessarily have to be 100, but we give you a lot of space because we were really hearing from students in truth over the last couple of years that they felt like they were running out of space for some of the questions. But I always have kind of framed it as filling in the end of a sentence or two, maybe three if you have a lot to say. So if it is, the best thing about last Tuesday was buy one, get one free Chipotle, good, let's do it. Let's hear it. That's fine. That's only a couple characters. That works for us. If you feel like you want to say the best thing about last Tuesday and you want to spend like a whole paragraph talking about how wonderful Maggie Much is, you probably want to use all 650 characters.
Right.
Just kidding.
So question about dual enrollment. So to confirm, for dual enrollment at a community college, the student would need to request the transcript from the college in addition to the high school.
If it's not printed on your high school transcript. So I know in Montgomery County, Anne Arundel County, Prince George, I think also in Howard County, a lot of these central Maryland schools, if you're doing dual enrollment, often it's shown as DE math, eighth period. If it's clear and on your high school transcript, that works great. If you're even at all nervous about it, though, just send the college transcript too. And if we have double copies, we have double copies. But kind of the rule of thumb is if it's complete college work, we need to see the grades for it. If it's in progress, you don't have grades for it, so that's okay.
Mhm. Great. And then will the application allow folks to choose between fall application versus spring?
So I'm sorry, could they choose fall versus spring?
Yes. I think.
Yes, you can apply directly to the spring. Um, in general. So like right now, for example, if I had not yet applied to fall 2025 as a freshman and I'm interested in spring 2026, this coming January, I can certainly apply directly that semester. But in terms of when we look at you and we review students for spring and freshman connection, no, you don't have to do anything extra to be reviewed for that.
Great. And so for the deadlines, is there a different deadline if you want to be considered for the spring and not for the fall, as far as freshman admission goes?
If you're applying directly to the spring, yes, that would be December 1st for domestic students and August 1st for international. But no, if you just want to be considered for spring, if the answer is no for fall, November 1st.
Great. Um, okay, next question. Is there a date for the fall open house?
TBD. I think in truth, we may have one internally on our calendars, but we have not published it just yet as we're kind of finalizing logistics. So stay tuned. And if you join our mailing list, another shameless plug, we should hopefully keep you in the know that way.
And then some schools have what's called a free application day for in-state students. Does Maryland have something similar to that? If so, what is the date?
We don't have, I know some schools that I've recruited with alongside in the past, for example, it might be like you can go apply on site that day. I'm sitting at a desk and you can apply, and I'm gonna tell you right away after I read your application if you're in or not. We don't have that, but I think this is probably a good chance to mention our fall and spring visit programs. We, as admissions officers and recruiters, get out there and we visit pretty much every single public school in Maryland that will allow us to visit, as many private schools as we can as well. Um, Maryland community colleges, and as many out-of-state schools as we can. There's a little bit more out-of-state than in-state, so we do our best to cover as many areas as we can. But why we don't have in-state in-school application days, we do have plenty of days where we come in and we're presenting to seniors, sometimes seniors and juniors, covering a lot of what we talked about tonight, going over the deadlines, all that jazz. So for students in the Zoom, keep your eyes on SCORE, Naviance, posters, whatever your school uses in the fall when you go back, because we might be coming. And if you're from Hartford and Cecil, hopefully I'll see you there.
Great. Are there any advantages for transferring from a Maryland community college?
That's a great question. Yeah, so there are certainly a lot of advantages from transferring from specifically a Maryland community college. It's not to say that coming from a four-year school isn't a great option. It certainly can be if you're not admitted. But one that I think is important to call out is we have a scholarship that is specifically offered to students who have either earned an associate's degree from Maryland Community College or a very close equivalency in the amount of credits. And that's called the Frederick Douglass Scholarship. And it's a full tuition or partial tuition scholarship that covers 2 years. And when you have an associate's degree, typically your degree is 2 years left. So it might very well cover your tuition for the last of your college education. And that is only available to students coming from a Maryland community college. They have to meet a couple other requirements as well. So that is certainly a big advantage. Also coming from any other state institution, so any Maryland community college or any University of Systems Maryland school, so Towson, Frostburg, University of Maryland, Eastern Shore, um, all of our other wonderful UMBC, Salisbury, all of their courses, as well as our courses, have already been evaluated to see how XYZ class does or does not get accepted between the schools. So, a long way to say, if I wasn't admitted to Maryland as a freshman, or I'm choosing to go somewhere else in state as my first year or two, it makes planning a lot easier because I know for certain I can take a look. Okay, these classes I'm taking at Towson, or these classes that I'm taking at, um, you know, uh, Worcester Community College, they are or not going to transfer over to the University of Maryland. So in terms of planning, I think it can be helpful too. And we have resources such as pre-transfer advisors where they're physically located at some of our Maryland community colleges.
Great. Is in-state residency a beneficial factor towards admission?
Good question. So, yes and no in the fact that we do consider residency. I mentioned, we are the state flagship institution of Maryland. It's incredibly important to us that the state of Maryland is represented on our campus, not only just by volume, but also Maryland in terms of who we are as a state. So making sure as many, if not all counties are represented is certainly very important. Every high school is represented. A long way to say that yes, we do admit about 70% of our students from the state of Maryland. That's our charge. But my out-of-staters don't hit exit just yet. The good news is the way the numbers work out is we are actually equally competitive in and out of state. And I've had territories, I've had New Jersey, I've had Long Island, I've had Maryland. When I'm out of state, I hear, well, you only like Maryland students. And when I'm in state, I hear, well, you only let out of state students in because they pay more. Neither is true. What is true is that we admit 70% of our students from Maryland, and then from there, who decides to come is up from students. So most years, those who choose to enroll is somewhere between about 70-30 split. But we are equally competitive in and out of state. So don't feel like you're at a disadvantage. The numbers luckily work out beautifully.
Great. Let's see. Do internships in or out of Maryland impact the chances of admission?
I mean, in the sense, certainly, yes, it help. It's not to say if you don't have internships or any experiences going to hurt you, but just like extracurriculars, community involvement, all those 24 factors, any and all things you've been a part of, happy to read about and certainly can be a very positive thing for your application. Because A, it can give us a sense of what you've done, but B, when we're reviewing for things like LEP majors or special programs, can really give us a sense of what might be a good fit for you.
Great. Do you review applications all at the same time or do you review them as they are submitted? In other words, is there an advantage to submitting application in early August versus October?
That's a really great question. So, no, we will not start reviewing any earlier than the deadline. I typically tell students that I work with, or I'm meeting with, or I'm presenting with, aim to get it in a week, maybe two ahead of time. And the reason I say that is again, it's not that we are going to start reviewing at that any earlier, but we're all humans. I've been a part of the admissions process in some capacity or another for well over 10 years. And every single year without fail, I have more than one student, so don't think it could happen, it couldn't happen to you, who realizes on November 3rd that they're incomplete because they requested for their test scores to go to the University of Maryland, Baltimore County, or they sent their transcript to the University of Maryland, Eastern Shore. Those are wonderful. Our cousins in the university system, program, but they're separate institutions entirely from us. If you realize that on November 3rd, you're a part of the regular deadline. If you realize that on October 15th, all good. Let's go request those scores. Let's send those transcripts. We have time essentially to make human mistakes and to correct them ahead of the deadline.
Great. Let's see. How do volunteering hours impact the application slash is that listed as one of the factors?
I don't know if it's specifically spelt out as hours, but yeah, certainly volunteering is something we're happy to learn about. So if you volunteered, you are more than welcome to share any and all things that you've been a part of in that capacity.
Great. And then if someone participated in the Terp Young Scholars program at Maryland, how do they submit that transcript to Maryland, or do they need to submit it? And how do they let Common App know that they participated in the program?
Great question. So if you did Terp Young Scholars and were granted credits, you took a class this summer, we would not need a copy of that transcript. That's actually, I guess, like the exception, because even if it's not on your high school transcript, we can see it. I'm gonna guess that you probably need to um, send it to the other schools that you're applying to. So, request it from our registrar's office. But in terms of admissions, we are just going to look at it on our end. So, as long as you write in the common application under colleges and universities, you'll just enter as if you were applying to any other school. Where you took the class, what it was, how many credits, all that jazz.
Great. Let's see. Next question. So just to confirm the recommendation count, so can you send two teacher recommendations and one counselor recommendation, so three in total?
Certainly.
Great. Let's see. Is demonstrated interest helpful?
I was trying to think. I was like, there was something else I answered in earlier questions that I wanted to mention wasn't in the factors, besides, legacy status. Demonstrated interest is not something that we track. So whether you have visited Maryland 50 times or 0 times does not help or hurt your chance of admission. I know sometimes on initial impact that can go, oh, really? Well, I came to this webinar and I'm going to come to the tour. I think particularly as the children or family or friends of alumni, hopefully this is good news because if you have visited campus a bunch of times in the unofficial capacity, you've come to tailgates and football games, or you've walked around for your sibling's graduation. If you've never taken an official tour, no big deal. It is there as a resource for you. We are here as the admissions office to guide and answer your questions. We want to be that resource. But if you haven't had the opportunity to visit or you feel like you're good to go, you don't need to, it's just not something we track or consider.
Great. All right, let's see. Some last few remaining questions. Is a club advisor considered a teacher as far as recommendations go?
Well, I'll throw it back to a question to you in the chat. If they are also a teacher at your school, yeah, that can count as a teacher. If they're not, like they're a club advisor, but they are from the middle school and they come up to your high school for the theater club, we would want it to come from someone else. I also would say if they're not, if you've never had them as a teacher, maybe have that be your additional person because we are very interested in hearing about you in the classroom.
Mhm. Great. And then as far as GPA goes, do admissions prefer to see unweighted or weighted?
In truth, because we aren't really using just GPA, it doesn't really matter. You know, again, there are some schools where the highest GPA possible is a 5.0. Some schools it's a 4.0. Some schools a 4.3. So for us, it's really not about GPA at all, and it's what makes up. I always say it's not the broth. I'm sorry, it's not the soup, which is your GPA at the end. It's the ingredients. So it's the broth, the vegetables, the rigor, the classes, the progression, the trends, not just that final product, so to speak. And for that reason, also I see in the chat, what's the average admitted GPA? I think technically it came out to be about a 4.5 or 4.6 this year. But average GPA again doesn't really mean much to us because for us, it's not really that mythical number. It's what does it make up of? You could have a 4.6 in some school districts and have several C's, maybe even a D on there, or you could have straight A's and have, a 4.2. So a long way to say you can add weighted or unweighted to your application for us because we're not looking at your grades on your application. We're looking at your grades on your transcript. That's what we're going off of.
Great. Um, do you look at it negatively if a student takes the SATs numerous times to get their score?
We will super score. So if you sat for it more than once and did better on certain sections on certain days, I did really, really well on SAT math in October, not so good, let's say November. We're going to take my higher math and combine it with my higher verbal and use those.
Great. And then a question about, oh, where did it go? Something about AP. Oh, so why are actual college level classes considered but not AP? And I think I want to also caveat like AP scores is different from AP classes.
Yes, yes, I should clarify. So I mean, when I said actual college classes, that's about sending transcripts. So what I mean is there's no transcript to send. If you took AP Psych, there's no college level transcript to send. But if I took Psych at Towson this summer, it's our expectation that you're sending that transcript. Or perhaps like a lot of New York schools on Long Island do this. They might instruct a class in the physical school, but it grants credit from Syracuse University. And if that's the case and you already have completed the class and it's not on your high school transcript, we would want a copy of that transcript too.
Great. Let's see. So, I guess what constitutes rigor in terms of coursework based off of the school? So, if your school has AP classes available, how do you all kind of determine what rigorous looks like?
Yeah, I mean, again, some of that's understanding and translating, and that's a part of our job. Getting things such as the school profile, like I mentioned earlier in the presentation, can be helpful. The truth is, what's available at every high school is different. What it means to take on a very challenging course load is different high school to high school, student to student. So things like the school profile, the counselor letter of recommendation, that's why it's a requirement. It can give us a lot of that context, can really give us a sense. Sometimes letters or school profiles might mention things like I know I mentioned before it might be the case that you can't take XYZ AP class at the same time as this one because they're taught at the same time by the same teacher. Or it might be a school does not allow you to take any rigor until junior year. And that context is really helpful because at the school down the road, they're taking AP and honors in ninth grade. We can't expect you to be taking on any more rigor than is available to you. So we'll use those profiles and letters to kind of guide us.
Great. Should unpaid internships be listed under employment or listed under employment on the Common App?
Unpaid? Yeah. Any involvement you guys can list. It doesn't have to be paid. It doesn't have to be a certain amount of hours. Any and all you can certainly list there.
Great. And then does your high school counselor have to write the letter of recommendation, or can a dual enrollment counselor write the letter instead?
Um, this is in truth, if some of these are a little specific, I may say shoot us an email. We connect you with your territory manager. If the counselor is in your high school and they're your high school counselor as well as your dual enrollment counselor, I suppose that could be fine. Sometimes we're playing the what if game, and I say let's just double down then. If you feel strongly about having your dual enrollment counselor also provide context, I would say let's have your counselor, your high school counselor, write that letter, and then maybe that third additional optional letter comes from your whomever that other person may be.
Yep. And then if the school does not do class rank, does this hurt someone's application since it's one of the 24 factors, or is it just not considered?
Exactly, just not considered.
Great. All right. I think we have time for a few more questions. We'll get through. Let's see. Should things be separated? For instance, if you're a manager at your job, do you list manager under leadership and job under work, or do you list it in both places?
I'm going to be honest with everybody in the crowd. That's going to be personal preference. I'm going to say, show me your style. You tell me. You get to frame it exactly how you would like to in your application, just like a resume you'd be sending off to a job. Don't hesitate, brag away, especially if you've worked your way up the ranks. But know that we are a little bit more concerned with learning that information about you than exactly how it's formatted. And there is no exact format we're looking for. So don't overthink it too much. I know there's a lot of pressure and it can be painful for someone on this side of the desk to say don't overthink it. But I think, if we're learning that, don't overthink the formatting. We're concerned with the content, not exactly how it's formatted.
Right. And we're going to go ahead and have one more question here. Maggie was, okay, we'll just answer that one. So, does applying for undergrad plus the grad one plus program, so for example, when you do the undergrad program for 4 years and then you have a plus one, does that improve chances of admission, or is it considered at par with undergraduate admission?
Yeah, that can be really simple. You can't. You cannot apply to any graduate programs upon admission. You can only apply as an undergraduate student. While we do have some plus one programs on the university's campus, there at this time, none of them are things that you would apply into as a high school student. Typically during sophomore or junior year at the University of Maryland, you're applying into them. So NA is the answer.
Great. And we are running out of time right now. So I know there are a couple of questions that are left in the chat, but if we were not able to answer your question directly, please feel free to email. I believe it's applymaryland@umd.edu, and we will make sure that you get your questions answered. You're also welcome to forward them to me directly. My email address is at JLEE1021 at umd.edu, and I'll put that in the chat as well. But thank you all so much for staying on and getting all of your questions answered as best as we could. I know we were supposed to end at 8. We went a little bit over. As we mentioned earlier, we will be sending out this recording to everyone who had registered. So look out for an email from us in the next week or so. And with that, go Terps. Thank you, everyone.